My father hid a daughter for years. Now her mother demands I evict my best friend so she can live with me, but I refuse to fix their broken family. When I was 14, my world was devastated. It immediately became clear that my father had been leading a secret life right beneath our eyes. He had fathered a kid with one of his staff, a 1-year-old girl without my mother's knowledge. Could you imagine? We were just your normal family. And then I realized I had a half-sister no one had ever mentioned. My brother, who is 2 years older than me, was so distraught that he cut off communication with our father for an entire year. And I could barely look him in the eyes after that. I never knew if my mother had known all along, or if she was simply heartbreakingly afraid of losing him. Perhaps it was because he had always been the breadwinner, earning a nice living and supporting all of us. Who knows? But I do recall her clinging to him through group therapy, counseling, and countless arguments. Against all obstacles, they remained together. After that much, you'd think he'd cut all contact with the other family permanently. But that never happened. He quit dating Karen's mother, although she remained a close friend. Surprisingly, my mother and the other woman appeared to have formed a strange sister-wife relationship. The entire experience was weird. Every holiday since then, Christmas, Easter, you name it, this woman would show up, knowing my father was married but still deciding to assist him damage our family. Her small child, my supposed sister, would also be there. And my brother and I were supposed to accept her as family. I simply couldn't do it. My brother took years to come around, and for a long, he skipped all holidays. But when Karen turned 4, he made an abrupt U-turn. He instantly chose to be her brother. He still refuses to speak to our father or Karen's mother, but he has somehow become Karen's protector. Maybe I sound bitter, but I have never considered Karen's mother as anything other than a homewrecker. And Karen, she was a living reminder of how everything had fallen apart. Intellectually, I knew my father was equally too responsible, but as a devastated teenager, it was always easier to aim my rage toward them. I made it plain. Karen would never become my sister. That single reality has resulted in years and years of animosity. No holiday or gathering has seemed right since. I could give you a detailed account of all the drama over the years, but it would take forever, and there is one major point here. Karen just decided to switch schools. Something happened at her previous one, but I honestly don't care about her high school drama. For perspective, in my nation, high schools can be specialized in areas such as painting, confectionery, and hairdressing. Karen withdrew out of her more general grammar high school, where she was struggling to keep up, and opted to try her hand at art school instead. She is not a prodigy, decent, but nothing spectacular, yet well enough to get into a highly recognized school. Coincidentally, the school is located close where I reside. Karen and her mother still live close to my parents, around 3 hours away, so getting to and from school would be difficult. 2 days ago, we had another awkward family meal. Yes, Karen and her mother were present, much to my dismay. The subject came up. Where was Karen planning to reside while attending school? I could tell they were circling around the genuine question, hoping I'd respond before they had to ask. When I didn't bite, they eventually spelled it out for me. Would I allow Karen to move in with me for the school year? Monday through Friday, she spends holidays with her mother. And get this. They marketed it as a major benefit to her because I also work in art. Suddenly, my so-called useless illustration business provided the ideal atmosphere for their darling kid. Let me explain why I'm saying no. First, there are decent dorms close to campus. Certainly not a 5-star motel, but ideal for a high school student. Second, I don't like Karen. I've always been open about our lack of relationship and no shared DNA will miraculously heal that. Third, my brother lives less than an hour away from the art school. He doesn't live next door, yet he gets along well with her. Fourth, when I went to Karen's mother for support during a difficult time and begged for a favor, she laughed in my face and flatly informed me we were not family. But now, we're only family when it suits her. Fifth, my flat is modest, and while I officially have a second bedroom, it is rented to my best buddy. I'm not kicking my closest friend out, no matter what guilt trip anyone tries to put on me. Sixth, they never asked, rather, they demanded. When I hesitated, they swooped upon me like vultures. Karen has anxiety. Dorm living would be hard on her. You're her only real sister. God wants us to be a family. I hold no religious beliefs. My brother's girlfriend is pregnant and nervous around strangers, so Karen can't stay there. And I should just evict my roommate because family comes first. The ridiculousness. To be honest, I could tell from how they were acting that they wanted me to hold out for a polite period of time before giving in. But the moment the argument heated up and people began shouting, I dropped all pretense and simply said no. That was it. Karen raced out of the home in sobs, and everyone else became silent. I was instructed to leave, so I did, and someone said something ridiculous about how I should go sign up for kindergarten because I clearly wasn't acting like an adult. Karen's mother later messaged me, and I marked her as read. My father tried calling, but I didn't answer. I refuse to be pushed, yelled at, or guilt-tripped into doing anything I find very unpleasant. I know it's not Karen's fault she ended up in this mess, but she's not my family, and I don't owe her anything in my life, let alone my house. That is where I stand. Update 1. When I arrived home, I found Karen sobbing on the sofa, her face buried in her hands, completely unraveling. My roommate instantly grabbed me aside and explained what had just transpired. Karen apparently arrived expecting to meet me and was surprised to find my roommate instead. She instantly inquired whether my roommate was visiting or about to leave, to which my roommate responded calmly that she was neither. That created a one-sided dispute, with Karen getting louder and louder as my roommate tried to calm her down and de-escalate the situation. Karen soon appeared to be experiencing a breakdown. My roommate described it as a panic attack, and I have no reason to dispute her at all. But as soon as Karen noticed me, her meltdown changed course. She began yelling at me, calling me a terrible sister, a liar, and a leech, and hurled more accusations my way. I could understand the nasty sister aspect, but being a liar and a leech ached. I tried not to snap back, kept my cool, and eventually calmed her down enough to discuss without revealing our family crisis to the entire building. That's when the truth started to emerge. Molly and my father had been using the prospect of Karen living with me and attending that prestigious art high school as leverage for at least 6 months. Since Karen opted to quit her stepping stone high school, they have thrown it at her repeatedly. You will not be able to live with your sister unless you maintain decent marks. Clean your room or turn in your phone. Even worse, they requested that she drop her friends and delete her social media accounts. Essentially, the prospect of living with me had been dangled in front of her for years. I felt terrible when I realized that. To be honest, I didn't disbelieve her story for 1 second. It was classic Dad. Growing up, he used to promise us enormous things and make us cry in the hopes that he would eventually deliver. Perhaps not. Molly apparently went so far as to tell Karen that I had consented to a 1-week trial run and that she would then spend the rest of the summer at her father's house to prepare for the actual relocation. I had no clue they'd promised her that, especially since I'd made it clear from the start that I opposed the notion. Looking back, perhaps they assumed that if Karen came up at my house, I'd simply yield, having stepped back so many times in the past to keep the peace. Perhaps having Karen there in my home would make it impossible for me to refuse. And I would have let myself to get steamrolled again so as not to ruin her fantasy. The whole thing sucked. But for the first time, Karen and I genuinely spoke, really chatted. We spent 40% of the time trash-talking our shared parent. 40% were ranting about Molly. And the rest was entirely about art. Oddly enough, I discovered a silver lining in that catastrophe. I'm not saying I'm suddenly ready to be the doting big sister or take her home, but for once, there was some genuine connection behind the anguish. She eventually flopped on my bed and fell asleep before her parents arrived to fetch her up. I waited there, emotionally tired. My father finally arrived at 11 p.m., furious that Karen had fallen asleep and perplexed that I hadn't simply let her spend the night. But I became even furious. After piecing together Karen's story, I was itching to hear his side as well. At the very least, he listened. I let off a 5-minute rant so quickly that I could hardly breathe. And by the time he managed to say something, I doubt he remembered half of what I had said. I hardly gave him a chance. He only told me that he'd call me later to adequately address it. Now I'm waiting for that call. Feeling emptier than ever. I'm so emotionally spent that I can barely think straight at work. I ended up staying at a friend's apartment for the night. Nothing romantic. Just the comfort of platonic connection, which we have had since we were children. I know I have a lot to figure out, so I've started building a list of everything I need to accomplish when I get the motivation to try again. Right now, all I want is some clarity and tranquility, if I can find it. Update 2. I apologize for the silence. Life has been so hectic that finding time or energy to update seemed impossible. But I have to explain what happened. I really enjoyed all of the advice and knowing that I wasn't insane, even if this update will probably disappoint anyone expecting for a good conclusion. Karen, my half-sister, appeared at my door not long after everything had gone wrong, as if the universe was playing a cruel little joke on me. The timing could not have been more absurd. I did not squander a second. I contacted my father and informed him that unless he picked her up right away, I would contact the police. He arrived, claiming that he would explain everything. But predictably, it took some serious cornering before he said anything. Perhaps he thought that if he told me just enough, I would stop bothering him. But I needed answers, so I met with him face to face last week. He had no way out at that point. What I discovered was every bit as wild as I had expected. Karen's mother, Molly, as I've dubbed her, was in grave financial problems. Part of me wanted to blame it on her being too young to have a child, but Molly's overall sense of maturity seems stunted. Perhaps there was a traumatic childhood. Perhaps not. I don't care at this moment since whatever happened, Karen is the one who is suffering the price. Molly had created a pile of debt for herself by taking out too many loans with no practical possibility of repaying them. She is currently losing everything as a result of the debt reduction process. Even her pay is being reduced by the state, leaving her with barely enough to exist. To make ends meet, she decided to sell her flat and move into something so little that I literally cringed when I saw it. She wanted to stay at my father's house, but fortunately my mother had already established tough boundaries. Molly and Karen were not allowed to stay at the house for more than a week. Only on special occasions, such as when Molly's building was being constructed. What's her plan? Purchase this pretentious chicken coop of a studio apartment and squeeze herself and Karen into the cramped area. The rationale must have been, perhaps someone else will step in to help, because I was suddenly receiving guilt-tripping indications that I should take Karen in, as if that would solve everything. Despite my instincts, I let Karen to stay with me for a while. It was disastrous. Living with her was impossible. I never recognized how distressed she was because I never spent enough time with her to fully understand it. She was troubled by night terrors, leaving my best friend, a true light sleeper who has a physically demanding job, weary every day. Furthermore, Karen appeared to be allergic to cleaning and snatched my watch. After that, I called my father and told him I wasn't going to put up with this longer. My father begged me, virtually groveling to let her stay. He promised she'd get better. But, even if it were true, I wasn't going to be the one going through it. I drew a line in the sand. I would only consider bringing Karen in provided she attended therapy. However, Molly, in her infinite wisdom, does not believe in therapy. Of course. Honestly, I should not have been surprised. I expected my father to step up and take Karen in, but my mother was insistent. She flatly refused. That resulted in a massive dispute. And in the end, my mother had a panic attack and was hospitalized. That was the last straw. Karen was sent back to her mother. Molly was furious. At me, not at her own decisions. According to her, I am the only person in the world who could provide them with a proper home, but I am simply too nasty to make room for them. Hatred is her word. But to be honest, a part of me is genuinely upset, enraged at being put in this situation. Then my brother got involved, berating me for not stepping up, despite the fact that he owns a house. But of course, he has a newborn baby, which is meant to relieve him of all responsibility while shifting all of it to me. He had the audacity to argue that blood should be thicker than water. When I told him that my best friend lives with me, he acted as if my blood was irrelevant in this situation. Now it appears like everything is in limbo. My father is constantly trying to wear down my mother, and when he isn't bickering with her, he makes passive-aggressive insults at me. Molly bombards me with her own brand of guilt-inducing messages, while my brother no longer bothers to hide his disgust. I'm not sure how much more of this I can take. I'm definitely considering cutting everyone off entirely. It's honestly devastating to see my entire family turn against me. At least I have a best friend. She's probably the only nice thing to come out of this situation. I still feel bad about putting her through exhaustion and allowing my father to manipulate me for so long, but I'm eternally grateful she's still with me. Update 3. I thought it couldn't be any worse. I was mistaken. Last Tuesday, my best friend arrived home from work looking really exhausted. At first, I assumed it was simply another horrible day at her job. But when she sat me down with that serious expression that I'd only seen twice in our 15-year friendship, my stomach fell. She had been receiving calls, anonymous ones, always while I wasn't around. The caller would hang up as soon as she answered, but she could hear background noise, a television and children playing. It was creepy enough that she had started allowing calls to go to voicemail. Molly arrived at her workplace 3 days ago. My best buddy works at a veterinary clinic and Molly walked in, claiming she needed to address critical family concerns involving me. She accosted my friend during her lunch break and went on this insane rant about how I was poisoning everyone against Karen. I was so selfish and callous. And, this is where things get really crazy, how my friend was facilitating my cruelty by staying with me instead of making room for actual family. My friend, bless her, told Molly where she could shove her opinions and threatened to contact security. But Molly was not done. She even had the nerve to offer my friend money, 2 months' rent, to move out temporarily so Karen could have the room. When my pal rejected, Molly's facade slipped completely. She began yelling about how my friend was a leech living off me. How she was probably sleeping with me anyway, and how no true friend would get in the way of family. Molly had to be escorted out by security, but not before she shouted loudly enough for the entire waiting area to hear that my buddy was a homewrecker who kept sisters apart. My poor friend was horrified, especially because her employer and numerous clients witnessed the entire episode. But here's when things get very twisted. When I approached my father about Molly's actions, expecting him to be shocked, he instead attempted to defend her. "She's desperate," he explained. "You have to understand, she's losing everything." When I pointed out that harassment and workplace stalking are unacceptable regardless of someone's financial condition, he had the audacity to claim that if I had just aided the family from the start, none of this would have happened. That's when it clicked. I asked him directly if he knew about Molly's plot to harass my friend. The stillness was so extended that I feared the phone had been dropped. Finally, he acknowledged that Molly had stated that she might try to reason with my roommate personally. He did not stop her. He knew she was going to ambush my pal at work, but he did nothing. I was so upset that I couldn't talk, but then he delivered another bombshell. Apparently my mother has been having what he refers to as episodes since the hospital incident. She's been obsessed with the whole thing, staying up all night studying Karen's new school, and even calling the admissions office pretending to be Karen's guardian to inquire about housing choices. My father appears really concerned about her mental health. But instead of getting her professional assistance, he's been attempting to address the problem by pressuring me to take Karen in. "If you just agree to let her stay for the school year," he added, "your mother could finally have peace. We could all move past this." The deception was so obvious that it made me laugh, a bitter, hollow sound that astonished even me. I explained to him that it was not my obligation to improve Mom's mental health at the expense of my own peace and safety. That's when he completely lost it. "Safety," he said. "She's a 17-year-old girl, not a criminal. Your own sister." "Half-sister," I clarified. "And not by choice." He hung up on me. 2 days later, my brother arrived at my apartment unexpectedly. I should have known something was up when he knocked instead of just strolling in, as he always does. He appeared weary. The baby has been keeping him up, and his girlfriend has been struggling with postpartum depression. I felt a tinge of sympathy until he began speaking. Dad contacted him with a new solution. My brother's house has more space, and he's allegedly on better terms with Karen, so perhaps she should move in with him. But here's the kicker. His girlfriend flatly refused. She's already struggling enough without adding a difficult adolescent, especially one who has night terrors and behavioral issues. Naturally, my brother decided it was all my fault. If I had taken Karen in from the start, none of them would be experiencing this stress. His lover would not be weeping herself to sleep due to Dad's pressure. Mom would not be experiencing breakdowns. Everyone's troubles would be solved if I simply did the right thing. I mentioned that he might have offered to take Karen himself months ago, but he shook his head. "I never wanted her living with us," he told me. "But you live alone with just a friend. You have the space, you work from home. It makes sense." The arrogance was astonishing. When I informed him that I'd already tried living with Karen and it had been a disaster, he remarked that perhaps I hadn't tried hard enough. Maybe if I'd been more patient, understanding and sisterly, I'd have had enough. I told him that if he was worried about family duties, he could move his pregnant girlfriend and newborn baby in with Dad and Mom, freeing up his home for Karen and Molly. The expression on his face was priceless, complete terror at the concept. "That's completely different," he exclaimed. "I have a family to think about." "So do I said. "My chosen family. My friend who's been with me through everything while you all demand I throw her out for someone who stole from me." He departed after that, but not before informing me that I was being selfish and would later regret pushing everyone away. Maybe he is right. Maybe I'm selfish. But I'm tired of being the family's scapegoat, the one everyone expects to give up her happiness and stability to keep the peace. I'm tired of being guilt-tripped, manipulated, and having my boundaries violated. My companion and I have begun looking at flats in a different section of the city, somewhere my family is unaware of. I haven't informed them yet, but I believe I'm done with everything. With each of them. The saddest part? I really feel horrible for Karen. Nothing is actually her fault. She's merely a child caught in the midst of adult chaos. But I can't save her without destroying myself, and I've finally accepted that it's not my responsibility to try. Update 4. I never imagined I'd be back here writing another update. But life has a terrible sense of humor. The apartment hunting did not go as planned. It turns out that finding a suitable home that welcomes pets within our budget, my friend has a cat, I failed to mention, is more difficult than imagined. But it is the least of our current issues. 3 weeks ago, my buddy Anna returned home, looking as if she had seen a ghost. I was in the middle of a client call when she rushed through the door, so I had to finish up fast before she could tell me what occurred. She was at the grocery store when she ran into Maris, my brother's girlfriend. Maris apparently looked horrible. Dark circles and disheveled. The works. Maris burst into tears right in the cereal aisle after what should have been a courteous hello. Between sobs, Maris told Anna everything. My brother has been putting intense pressure on her to reconsider taking Karen in. He comes home every day with new arguments. Karen's grades are dropping. Living in that small studio with Molly has made her depressed. It's only temporary till they figure something else out. But Maris is struggling to keep her head above water with the baby and her postpartum depression. The thought of adding a wild teenager to the mix made her fear. Here's where things get twisted. My brother supposedly told Maris that I'd largely agreed to accept Karen but was just being picky about practicalities. He made it sound as if I was playing games while a child was suffering. Maris felt bad about denying because, in her perspective, I was already willing to help but only needed to be convinced correctly. Anna, bless her, corrected the record right away. She told Maris everything that had transpired, including the theft, night terrors, and Molly's job harassment. Maris became pale and inquired why no one had told her about this. That's when Anna learned my brother was lying to everyone, weaving different versions of the narrative to make them feel bad. But wait, things get worse. Maris apologized to Anna before saying something that made my blood run cold. I just wish I understood why he's so desperate to help her now when he completely ignored her for years. When Anna asked what she meant, Maris said that my brother had been having secret phone chats with someone while constantly stepping outdoors or going to the garage. She assumed it was work-related, until she overheard a portion of a chat last week. She remembered what he said. I know, but I can't keep doing this forever, and she doesn't suspect anything, but the guilt is killing me. Maris confronted him on it that night. He broke down and said that he had been sending money to Molly. Not just recently. For years. Molly apparently contacted him shortly after Karen's birth, alleging she was struggling financially and that Dad was not providing adequate support. My brother, feeling bad for first rejecting Karen, began sending her money on a monthly basis. Small quantities at initially, then gradually increased as Molly's demands grew. The actual kicker? Molly had been telling him that Dad was unaware of the payments and that they needed to remain hidden because Dad was already doing so much. She portrayed herself as a struggling single mother who was too proud to seek for extra assistance from Dad. My brother ate it up, most likely because it helped him feel like a good brother without having to have a relationship with Karen. But this is where the plot takes a dramatic left turn. Maris dug through my brother's bank transactions and discovered that he had sent Molly more than $15,000 in the previous 3 years. $15,000, money that should have been spent on their home, wedding, and baby preparations. Maris was furious, but my brother asked her not to say anything because he was trying to fix the situation. That's why he's been so desperate to get Karen to move elsewhere. Molly had threatened to inform Dad about the money if the installments stopped. She said she'd tell Dad that my brother had been privately supporting his daughter for years while publicly rejecting her, making him look like a huge hypocrite. My brother got caught up in this blackmail scheme, and his answer was to get me to accept Karen so that the pressure would be lifted off him. Anna came home with all of this knowledge, and I honestly had no idea what to do with it. Part of me felt vindicated. I sensed something was wrong with my brother's abrupt change of heart. But largely I felt sick. For years the entire family has lied to and manipulated one another. I chose to call Maris directly. She was afraid to speak at first, but eventually everything came out. She's considered leaving my brother over this. Not just the money, though that was horrible enough, but the lies, the manipulation, and the way he has made her feel guilty for preserving her mental health. She said she didn't even remember who she married anymore. That conversation altered everything for me. I saw my brother wasn't simply being manipulative with Karen. He had been lying for years, just like his father. The apple doesn't fall far from its tree. I told Maris she deserved more and that nothing was her fault. I also informed her that if she ever needed a place to stay while she straightened things out, my couch was open. Not for Karen or my brother, but for her and the baby if they required an escape. She burst into tears and said how she had felt alienated, as if everyone in the family was against her for not bringing Karen in. Knowing the reality about why my brother was so persistent made her feel less insane, but also more hurt. What is the strangest part? She asked if I thought she should inform Dad about the money. I told her it was her decision, but Dad was probably already aware. Call it intuition, but the entire thing reeks of secrets inside secrets. 2 days later, Dad showed up at my door again. But this time, he appeared defeated rather than enraged. He sat down firmly on my couch and stated, "We need to talk about your brother." It turns out I was correct. Dad had known about the payments for several months. He discovered them by mistake when my brother sent a payment confirmation email to Dad's address rather than his own. Apparently their email addresses are similar, and it was an autofill error. Dad approached Molly, who broke down and revealed she had been influencing my brother for many years. But here's the bit that made me want to scream. Dad had been allowing it to continue since it put less strain on him to support Molly and Karen. He was essentially allowing my brother to subsidize his mistake while presenting himself as the good man attempting to bring the family together. The web of falsehoods and deception is so complex that just thinking about it makes me dizzy. Dad is leveraging my brother's guilt to dodge his own obligations. My brother is using manipulation to try to force me to solve his blackmail problem. Molly uses everyone else's guilt to pay her lifestyle. Mom is most likely having breakdowns because she perceives all of the falsehoods, even if she is unaware of the specifics. And me? I appear to be the only one who has been open about not wanting to be a part of this disaster, which somehow makes me the villain. Dad asked if I would consider taking Karen now that I understood the whole truth. I laughed, really laughed, and told him that learning about even more layers of falsehoods and manipulation didn't make me any more willing to participate. That's when he dropped the ultimate bombshell. He and Mom are thinking about divorce. Mom discovered that he knew about the payments and feels betrayed all over again. She has been staying at her sister's place for the previous week, so my brother's marriage is crumbling. My parents are about to divorce. Molly is undoubtedly worried about her money source running out, and Karen is still caught in the center of all this adult dysfunction. And I'm still the terrible guy for wanting to keep out of the situation. I don't know how to feel anymore. Part of me wants to tell everyone to figure it out for themselves and block all of their numbers. But another part of me, probably the one taught by years of family guilt, wonders if I should try to help in some way. Anna believes I should keep far away from all of them. She's undoubtedly correct, but it's difficult to watch your entire family crumble, especially when you know they brought it on themselves. I suppose we'll see what happens next.